Hello everyone, I'm Forrest McFreelava, and this is Speedplay Germany and Hearts of Iron 4, number 15. We left off with a foothold in the North American continent, our entire armored armies on the continent with the American forces generally just pressing forward. There are quite a few pockets of American resistance, and one of our units is even behind enemy lines. Ideally, what's going to happen is we're going to keep thrusting forward, seal off and destroy the enemy pockets, and really hopefully if we can just destroy enough of their forces caught currently behind our lines, then they won't have very many forces left to resist our further advance. That is the main goal. We'll see just how well it goes about. It looks like a lot of areas have already seen the lion's share of Allied forces caught behind our forces. New York has just fallen to our advancing armies. Really, things are just going very highly in our favor. Really, the initiative is in our camp, and it's up to us to just not drop it. There are a few American forces left in defense, but not very many. Up in Canada, there's a weirdly large amount of forces, yet we're still winning there. And once we manage to just destroy all of these encircled forces up in Maine and Nova Scotia, we should be great. Just generally, you'll notice we have a small number of forces on the actual front compared to behind the lines. That's completely fine. We may not be able to hold all the land that we have taken in New York State, for instance, although, first of all, we're going to go ahead and build up more nuclear facilities, more rocket facilities. Almost certainly the war will not go in a way that we need to use them. However, it's good to just keep our production all in use. We also build some aircraft carriers for later use if it comes to it. Anyway, though, the main thing is, even if we're pushed back from the very front edges, as long as we don't get too many of our units encircled, like that one unit in Quebec, then we should be fine. The majority of our forces are destroying all these encircled American forces. Once that's done, we'll be able to reinforce the front, press forward if we're ever being pushed back, which we aren't actually. We're still advancing on the front line, despite the fact that we have so few units on it. And you'll notice most of those encircled forces have already been destroyed. There they go. They're basically gone. That frees up probably half of the total strength of our military in the Americas to just push the front lines. Since they haven't even really been able to deal with the forces we have had present, I think that this new influx of forces is going to be enough to just break the back of American and Allied resistance on the continent. We're going to focus primarily on the United States, not so much Canada. Nothing against the Canadians, however, they just have much lower military potential than the United States does. I believe they had something like one division, with the rest all just being American forces in Canada. Potentially, that's just because they sent expeditionary units to the United States, which I believe may return to Canada once the United States capitulates. Not entirely sure how that works. All I know is the United States is really the juggernaut we have to face. And we're getting very close. We lost New York because we pulled back. It was unsustainable, but now we're pressing back into the city, pressing into New Jersey, all their northeastern areas. Up in the Canadian hinterland, we are still advancing, although slower than in the United States proper. And in the United States, you'll notice we just have overwhelming forces. There are significant sections of the front which do not have any American soldiers on them whatsoever. It looks as though the main portion of the American defense was just really forwardly centered in Maine and Nova Scotia. By destroying that, it looks like we really cut off their resistance in the continental United States. Up in Canada, we are facing much stiffer resistance, but it's less significant that they resist, so we're just going to keep pressing forward and really just doing the best we can. If we're lucky, we'll eventually encircle these Canadian forces. If not, I don't really think it will matter all that much. As long as we keep making gains against the United States, we will ultimately win this invasion, win this war, and bring the Second World War to a very, very positive close for our nation. We will really just dominate the world. At this point, we also have a few texts to research, just basically industry things. You'll notice there are just a whole bunch of alerts that we're not even beginning to look through at this point. It doesn't really matter. As long as we can just keep moving, we will win. I believe the most difficult bit of this invasion was really just getting it off the ground. Now that it's here, we have even Washington, D.C. mostly encircled. We're pressing all the way across several of their states. It is really probably going to be the closing notes on the American Empire, which I guess hasn't even really taken off. Alright, so with that all said and done, we are just driving all of our forces manually. You'll notice we don't have the AI set up to do anything at this point, since, quite frankly, I don't trust the AI enough to make very important decisions. The AI is pretty great for just maintaining a front line, not so much for actually being the driving figurehead of any advances. They really don't take any initiative, etc. So what we're going to do is probably just keep manually controlling things for a moment until we manage to clear out most American resistance, and then probably go ahead and give the AI control over the general direction that our armies take. It will mean that we act less efficiently, and that is really just a given. You'll also notice that we do have 3 army groups, all kind of intermixed with one another, which probably, I would assume, gives penalties to command and actually the ability for our armies to organize and fight effectively, since we have 3 different chains of commands all acting independently around one another. I wish we could set an overarching command structure above those 3 armies, some sort of like army group, as you were able to do in Hearts of Iron 3. Although obviously I can see why they would want to limit the ability to just keep stacking bonuses for leaders and whatnot, as it could get a bit ridiculous and potentially overpowered. At any rate, though, we are just driving through. We have purged a large portion of the American countryside. You'll notice most of our forces are caught over in New York, but we do have some small areas. I mean Washington, and Washington just fell. So there we go. All of those forces are now more or less released. We just managed to select everybody. And at this point, since we do just have one major front line to focus on, something we may do is just unify all 3 of these groups. There we go. Go ahead and set up some crazy far advanced attack line. Maybe not exactly like that. We'll just go all the way along the coast. That turned into 3 smaller attack lines. That should probably be decent. And we'll go ahead and just assign our most skilled leader, the person in charge of all of our forces, just for the rest of the war, honestly. And so he's now in command. We put some random guy in charge of all of our garrison forces in the old world. And now the AI will hopefully take care of the gist of this invasion. We're going to go ahead and just funnel into all of the areas without troops, just so we don't garrison all those. And hopefully just manually select a few of the more important areas to attack across. With that hopefully all resolved, the AI hopefully won't really mess things up too much, and it'll just take away a decent amount of the microwing for this invasion. There really aren't anywhere near as many American forces left as there are our forces, and since our forces are all rapid attack units, and theirs are in part armored, maybe some motorized, but a lot of infantry, victory is pretty much assured at this point. It's just a matter of getting from where we're at to the actual point of achieving victory, as redundant as that is. We're also probably going to try to drive all the way south, kind of like the American Civil War. We're just going to drive from the north over to the southern coast, split what's left of the United States, and hopefully just capture all of these southern portions. You'll notice we did get partially encircled, but that won't be a problem since we're just advancing so far on the front. Over in the area where all of the attack plans are actually coming out of, we're probably going to just stay put while we focus on the south, which means that I should probably rearrange our attack orders to focus more accurately on our southern offensive. We are also just driving up in the Canadian hinterland ever more. We aren't doing as great as I would like, but we are doing fairly well. We are also just roving through the south without really much resistance, and it seems as though the United States, while historically a major threat, at this point in the war is not really that much of a concern of ours. It's just going to be a matter of taking over their country in a way that is the least micro-intensive. Say what you will about the portrayal of a rather major world power in such a light, but that does seem to be the situation at hand. So we are once again just continuing to drive our forces through. Some small amounts of American forces are encircled. We have set up more or less a north-south defensive line with Chicago under our control. And it's at this point I am looking over the front and probably considering just making a new group of attack orders, as it is getting slightly annoying dealing with the AI trying to reorganize our units and put them in areas where they really shouldn't be, because I think that it's more important that we make significant breakthroughs than hold every single portion of the line with equal strength. So while that being said, it isn't really that much of a tremendous concern at the moment. We do go ahead and just break off a new command though, since so many forces are being driven to Canada. We may as well just create a separate Canadian front and go ahead and just give them orders to vaguely take Quebec. That force we're going to go ahead and put under the command of, I believe, not Hans Guderian, but Erich von Manstein, I believe. It is something like 2 divisions over the actual amount that he can use, so we go ahead and put those in the other front. And we're going to go ahead and just deselect that army from focusing on the Canadian frontier, since obviously we already have an army doing that. We're also going to focus their major attack just on the southern Gulf Coast of the United States. They do assign 14 units to go deal with 1 unit just hidden behind the line, which I'm not really pleased about. Luckily, that does mean that they'll be pulling forces over towards the east, which will help us invade the south as they get away from the western defensive line. So that being said, we do start just plucking over the units that are being sent behind the lines. And we're going to just attack that area with all of our forces nearby in order to hopefully just defeat that portion and get all those units reassigned so we don't have to keep manually selecting them. Overall, though, we are making great progress. With Chicago under our control, basically everything in the north up until the Rocky Mountains is ours that we need to worry about. We'll just roll down through the American southern Gulf Coast until we kick them out of the Atlantic entirely or they surrender. Not sure which of those is going to come first. The most important thing, though, is that we take as many strategic or significant in any way areas as quickly as we can. Just keep the initiative on our side, which shouldn't be too difficult just given the general makeup of our forces. And yeah, just keep on keeping on. The invasion is doing very well at this point. It would take some active effort on my part to mess it up. And I don't intend to be doing any of that. If this wasn't Iron Man mode, this moment, or maybe a little bit before, would have been an interesting time to see if I could play as the United States and turn things around and maybe take back the world, which honestly sounds incredibly fun, although this is Iron Man, so I can't get a copy of a save and do that. I might actually not play Iron Man the next time in case I want to do something like that, or I could just play a minor power in Iron Man mode and see just how well I could bring that up from 1936. At any rate, though, the American forces are basically falling apart. I had checked the war score screen earlier, and it looked as though they were fairly close to capitulation, so we're just going to keep driving through even further and hope that we do actually manage to break them. We are taking a few key victory points, key just in the sense of victory points that are nearby to our front line, and they should be very close to surrendering, so maybe just 1 or 2 additional territories, and all of a sudden the game lags very hard. It is because we have won the invasion of the United States. All that's left now is to clean up whatever remaining allied nations exist in the world, and probably also the neutrals. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe. We're going to clean up the rest of the world and then probably start a new campaign, not sure quite yet in what.